officer, an accomplished officer.
And 4 over and out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you guys for tuning in. It's Coach Clee, your motivational speaker, your empowerment coach, your author, and your favorite baker's favorite baker. Thank you guys for tuning in. Most of you guys already know that this is the lab that transitioned into Black and Blue, and we are live with Black and Blue, and we got a special guest backstage right now. I'll introduce him in a minute. Some of you may know him, some of you may not. He's on a different coast right now, so I know some of you local guys that'll be tuning in. You'll have a treat. You'll get to learn something new about somebody, and you'll get to ask your questions. We got to give a shout out to MG4 Tech. He's in the comment section. Make sure that you check his website out. He's the one who did the flyer that you just saw. He can supply all your online needs. All right. We also got to give a shout out to One Way Publishing. One Way Publishing is a book publishing company that prides themselves on saying they can turn a mere thought into a book that's bought. And proof of them doing that is one of their clients and also a good friend of mine. He was a former guest on the show. The lab is Marion Small, who hails from Texas. He wrote a children's book on financial literacy and investing and the importance of investing. And if you don't believe me, check this out. One Way Publishing introduces published author Marion Small.
Tell me what a man does.
Okay.
So, whenever I figured that out, I'm like, okay, what is a man? So, what I came up with is a man is a current state of being. So, and the type of
what's the name of your book?
Cornell buys his first pair of sneakers.
There it is.
The book in summary is about Cornell, of course, who learns financial management through his parents, through buying his first pair of sneakers. And the journey to actually understanding what money is and obtaining the goal to get rich and not look rich.
Since being published, his book has been enjoyed by many. It has even been entered into the school library of the Jimmy Tyler Brashear Elementary School. Give your kids the opportunity to succeed in life and get your copy now.
Subscribe now.
And like I said, his link is in the comment section, cornellsdigitalplatform.com. Make sure you guys check that out. Not right now. Make sure you guys check that out after the stream. And if you're looking for one-way publishing or just want to be a guest on the show, let me know. The link is in that platform as well, workwithclee.com. You can subscribe to that and get all your questions answered. But without further ado, we're going to jump into the meat and potatoes of the show. While you guys are all here, right now I got backstage with me. You see his name right there, Deon Joseph. He's an online sensation. He is a community advocate and community policing a community policing expert and also an advocate on the fight for homelessness and trying to eradicate it off the planet right here. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm going to bring to the stage Deon Joseph. Deon, you there?
I'm here, brother. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for making yourself available. I appreciate it. Hey, Deon, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a 26-year veteran of law enforcement, still active in the Los Angeles area. 24 of those years working in a place known around the country and even around the world for homelessness called Skid Row. I was when I started, I didn't want to be a police officer at all. I wasn't a fan of law enforcement. Like many young African-American males, I was indoctrinated to hate and fear law enforcement. But then my family lost their business. I was out of work for 3 months and I met the most wonderful woman on the planet. So I wanted to make sure I supported her. So I put my name in the hat for the police department and said I was going to do 3 years, finish school, and do something better with my life. Ended up falling in love with it and falling into a place called Skid Row, where I actually found my true calling. And that's working with people that the world tends to forget or marginalize, and that's the homeless community. So that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of who I am.
Gotcha. So 3 years turned into the 26 years, like you said. That's a big deal. It's a big feat. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the conversation, are there any influencers or mentors that people helped you along the way that helped turn you into the person that you are now?
There are 4, and I'll make it real quick. My mother and father were engaged in community outreach their entire 47-year marriage, helped raise 41 foster children on top of their 4 children and 3 grandchildren. So I had to share love with a lot of people. They helped the homeless community every weekend. And my dad employed and empowered many African Americans and Latinos who were passed over for jobs, and even ex-convicts who needed a second chance. So they were big influences in my life as it relates to putting yourself out there to help people and stretching beyond the 4 walls of wherever your quote unquote church is to help people. Martin Luther King, obviously one of my heroes and hands down. I don't know what Martin Luther King would think of me today. I don't care. All I know is what he did for us and the sacrifice he made and the brilliance of what he did and how he did it. I will always pay homage. And then lastly, a 6'4" white man named William Snowden, who was my second training officer. And he was the stereotypical vision of what a racist cop looks like. Blonde hair, blue eye, big mustache. But this man had more love from the Black community in the Oakwood area of Venice, California than any cop, period. I couldn't understand why. And I remember when he arrested 2,300 people in that area over 14 years. So I'm like, how do you have this love from the community? Are you so dirty that these people are scared and they say hi to you and hug you and scream your name from the rooftops? So he pulls the car over and says, "Officer Joseph, you look puzzled." I said, "Sir, I don't understand why these people love you so much." And he said, "I don't care if we're arresting somebody, if we're counseling them, if we're bringing them bad news. I don't care what it is. As long as you're working with me, Officer Joseph, you will treat everyone we contact with dignity and respect. Do you understand that?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And it's not that he was teaching me how to be a good officer. I was already a good person. These are things and principles that were instilled into me by my parents. But the fact that he was affirming this and saying it was okay to be an open and a decent human being to people as a police officer, man, that created wonders for me. And now, as a result of his training, I got the same response. People calling my name from the rooftops, hugging me, kissing me. They're covered in scabies, but they still kiss me. They don't care about the coronavirus or monkeypox or any of that. They just come and get Officer Joseph. So it's a blessing. So those are the 4 mentors that blessed my life.
Wonderful. And since they blessed your life, how do you feel that they've how it affects you now? You said that Officer Snowden, he was getting hailed from the rooftops. You're getting that now. Do you also transcend that to the rookies that are coming on, the newer officers?
Absolutely. I do everything I can through my walk, but also through education. We have a program called PSL with my agency, where every month there are officers who are about to become full-fledged officers after being on the field about a year. And they call me in to mentor, and I pass this knowledge and wisdoms and all these principles that I've utilized to build public trust to these individuals who may be getting burned out because of the times we're living in, or becoming jaded or becoming numb because they've taken so much. And my goal is to let them know, don't give up on your community. Look, I know we're not going to solve this anti-police problem on a macro level. That's impossible. We have a lot going against us. We have the media. We have professors on college campuses shaping people away from public service. But in your community where you serve, in that little area, your reporting district, or wherever you are, if you be the best version of yourself and treat them with dignity and respect on a micro level, you can. And I wanted to be the living embodiment of that in front of it, show them that it's possible.
Wonderful. That's a good answer. And I know, like you touched on, in 21st policing, it's kind of difficult right now. I know our job goes through very cyclic effects. We're extreme highs, extreme lows. It seems like we're coming out of an extreme low and starting to build up a little bit of momentum right now. How do you feel that the police department and across the nation deals with the public, positively or negatively? And how do you feel the public deals with the police department? And what changes do you think that we could make to take on these challenges?
Well, it's so, not funny. It's so interesting to see. You're right. This is cyclical. We've seen this in waves. You see an incident happen, the country reacts, but usually with those incidents, there's most of the country in the back of their mind, they know they still need the police. So they're not about defunding and all that. This one was so extreme, and so our detractors are so well orchestrated, and they were implanted in almost every facet of our country, whether it's the education system, whether it's social work, whether it's high school teachers. And it's almost like they all got together and said, we have to dismantle the system this way. And then it got into police agencies, our city councils, mayor's offices, and everybody bought into this theory that the police were the problem. I don't believe that. I don't believe police officers, 800,000 men and women who wear a badge, are a systemic failure. We work in systemic failure, because as long as the real systemic failures exist, like poor mental health treatment, mental health laws that are broken, horrible responses and policy as it relates to homelessness, relaxing laws that rob accountability for criminals and take away relief from citizens. As long as we're dealing with those things, we're always, no matter what they say on TV, no matter what they preach, we're always going to end up being the tip of the spear, and that's never ever going to change. So what's different now, like I said, is it's so toxic because of the age of social media. I remember during the Rodney King scandal, I came on at the tail end of the Rodney King scandal, and yeah, there were people who were angry, and I was upset about what happened to Rodney King, but in the end, they knew they needed it. Then comes I call it the Rafael Porez scandal. Some people call it the Rampart scandal. I don't call it the Rampart scandal. I call it the Rafael Porez scandal because that was a couple of cops who were doing dirt. And a lot of the cops that worked there didn't even know they were doing what they were doing. But of course, when two bad apples run amok, it makes us all look bad. And that's an impossible standard to live by. Think about it. Doctors don't get held to the same standard. Look at doctors. Doctors killed 450,000 individuals, most of them people of color, through malpractice, misdiagnosis, and accidents, right? How come there's not a doctor having to answer all these questions on CNN and MSNBC? They don't have to answer these questions. The military, God bless the military. I love them. I support everything they do. But don't tell me that there haven't been across the wars throughout history, and even currently, military officials and officers who've done things that are deplorable and horrible that we all should condone and condemn, probably more than cops. But once again, why isn't there a military personnel? And then lastly, teachers. I love teachers. And I'm focusing on these professions because these are professions that directly impact people at a high rate. Teachers, I believe teachers are incredible. They do incredible work. But every week we turn on the TV and see a teacher who molests a third grader, or some teacher who is sleeping with somebody's 17-year-old daughter. We just had a guy sleep with 28 first graders somewhere in this country. They did a sting where I think they arrested 181 teachers, but nobody's calling for defunding of teachers. Why isn't there a teacher being called out on the carpet? But we do this to cops. And what I tell people about cops is this, and if I'm talking too long, let me know.
No, you're fine.
Police officers are a microcosm of society. What that means is this. In the United States of America, out of 330 million people, I think you and I agree that the vast majority of those people, no matter who they are, whether they're black, white, Christian, Jewish, gay, straight, atheist, Muslim, devil worshiper, hell, for all I care, Samoan, Aborigines, no matter who they are, we all agree that most Americans are decent human beings. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with
I
that?
agree. I think that's a full statement.
Okay. So same country. We also can and should agree that in a country full of 330 million people, though we know most of them are decent people, there's a negative exception that's somewhere in the hundreds of thousands and low million. Do we agree with that? From all
Yes.
those walks of life? Absolutely. Where do law enforcement agencies get their people from? The American public. And I can assure you all that the vast majority of people that are selected in law enforcement are decent, hardworking people just trying to do. We're human beings policing other human beings. And our job can often be as unpredictable and difficult as humanity is. And the general public has lost sight of that we're just being. It's not excusing bad behavior, because I can't stand dirty cops just like the next guy. I don't
agree.
mind being held to a high standard. I don't mind it. I believe that's a profession where we all should be held to a high standard. But don't hold me to a standard that you can't even hold yourself to. And that's why I hate when I'm talking to people and they go, "Oh, why don't you go to all the bad cops?" How am I going to go across the country and deal with 800,000 people? How am I supposed to do that? You know,
Yeah.
all I can do is look at my experience and the vast majority of police officers that I've worked with over 25 years, and that's about 1,200 officers in 3 different divisions. I've only had to report misconduct 3 times.
Wow.
What does that tell you about
That's a low
where
number.
I work?
Yes.
That's low. That's very
Mhm.
low. So we have to look at it like that, and we have to. Here's the answer to that: we have to find a way to fight and get back on these college campuses to get the other side out. See, what they've done right now is successfully shut down opposing opinions, and that's a dangerous place to be if you're in a country. That's fascism. That's fascism. Prior to this whole fiasco in Minnesota, I was one of the most sought after speakers to go to college campuses, or you'd have college campuses flying all the way out to spend 3 hours with me in Skid Row. And I loved that in 2 hours, I was able to erase 2 semesters of indoctrination for a lot of these kids,
Wow.
the future minds of America, by
Right.
putting real things that they couldn't deny and then walking them in the streets so they could see the relationship that the police have with the community. And not only the challenges that we face as law enforcement, but also the challenges that the people we serve face when we're not supported and they're not supported through a broken system. And I love that, because by the time I was done with them, they had more questions for their college professor than they had for me. But now they have shut that completely down, where these young folks, these great young minds, and I don't blame them. I blame academia today. I blame this whole woke culture that is keeping people from hearing the reality of policing. And if they ever heard the reality of policing again, I believe we can bring some balance back. But yeah, that's what needs to change. We got to get back to having dialogue and not bowing our head and saying, "Okay, yes, we're bad." I will never accept that. I know what I've done over 26 years. I know I've helped more people than my detractors have. I know that for a fact. My detractors, when somebody gets shot in the street, they're going to bury their head in the sand and say they didn't see nothing.
Yeah.
Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull up on that block and put my life on the line for the people that I serve and stay there so I can prevent a shooting from happening. I'm going to be a shield for them, whether they love or hate me. And that's something our detractors can't do. And I'll just finish with that. The definition of a hero is not just policing people who love and appreciate you. Anybody could do that. A true hero polices individuals who hate them as well. And if you can serve them as well, you can turn the tide in time. And that's what I've done over 24 years in Skid Row.
Perfect, man. You covered a lot of ground with that. I appreciate that. Thank you. One thing that resonated with me is, like you said, when the doctors do accidental surgeries or have taken people out, and they're not held to the same standards or accountability as well. I know we discussed this with my department. We're the only occupation where we have to wear body cams, and we're recorded 24/7 for every single incident that we're on, which is fine. Because I mean, we should be held to a higher standard. We should be performing professionally. I do agree with that. However, like you said, those other occupations who are doing things maybe under the rug a little shady, they're not held to that same standard, and they're the quality. They're dealing with people's lives, if not on the same level, more so than we are.
Yeah, and for me, the body cameras, like I said, we got cameras. I love the cameras. You know, in one day, the year before I got my camera, I had one man make 28 complaints on me in 1 year. And his complaint was he wouldn't allow me to sell beer in front of an Alcoholics Anonymous program in Skid Row. Okay, that made me the big bad racist, right? The next year I got my body camera, one complaint. One complaint. So I'm not against accountability. I love the cameras. The cameras protect me, and I have nothing to hide. But as soon as we mentioned putting cameras in the classroom, oh Lord, we can't do that.
Yeah.
So we got to stop trying to hold cops to a standard we won't hold other people to. And once again, we're not against accountability. Most departments are transparent. With my agency, I can't mention them. When there's a shooting, instead of allowing the activists to paint the narrative, we release the video of the shooting so people can see in real time. Because when you're hearing it on the news, and you may have a reporter who's an activist themselves who is painting a picture to guide people to a thought, you're hearing it in slow motion. But when you actually see the officer involved shooting and how fast it happens, all of a sudden it tamps down. So many agencies are embracing transparency, and it's sad that our politicians and a lot of individuals, not all politicians, I respect the politicians out there, are not saying this out loud, that agencies are trying to be more transparent. They're trying to change. But it's almost like our detractors won't let us, or they won't let others see the change. And that's where we are today. And that's what's so dangerous about today's time than when you and I probably were young cops running around like they're doing our job. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So let me ask you this. How effective and how much of an impact do you believe that community policing has, and more so today, as opposed to back pre-body cam, back pre-COVID and so many different things?
Well, it's a twofold answer. I believe in community policing. You're talking to Mr. Community Policing. Just Google Officer Deon Joseph.
The expert.
Google Officer Deon Joseph. Right. I believe it's an important facet of building trust. The base word of familiar is fam. Right. If you can't just police a community. You got to become like family to it so they can trust you. And that serves a great purpose, because when they trust you, that can protect you better than your vest and your gun can. It's like I've worked by myself for 17 years in one of the most chaotic, dangerous, unpredictable places in the United States of America. And my reputation precedes me. The people know I love them. They know I care about them. But here's what I say, because I know there's a lot of stress on community policing, but we also have to balance that with actual policing. Okay. And this is what I mean by that. You can embrace community policing and have everybody love you, right? The media, everybody loves you. But what good is that when criminals aren't being held accountable and people are still being shot dead on their front lawn, or you still get your grandma hit with a stray bullet at the cookout, or kids can't walk down the street without getting asked where they're from, and if they don't have the right answer, they get shot. So what good is it when everybody loves you, but they're still dying? So we need both. We need community policing, as a mechanism to gain trust in a genuine way, not for the purpose of just gaining trust to juice people. I engage in community policing because I actually love my community. But I also need help on the upper echelons of our justice system to step in and say, okay, you're building the trust, but on the other end, we have to hold the criminal element that is hurting the community accountable, because you have community policing. You can get a hug all day, but it doesn't matter if people are still dying.
Good point. Good point. I know our department, we hold community policing to a high standard. And so far, everyone that I've interviewed on here on Black and Blue holds community policing to a high standard. Feel it's necessary. And it is necessary. For one, gets you where cops are known to be riding around in cars and all they do is harass people, per se, is what we hear all the time. But you get outside the car, you actually start walking the beat. You engage with business owners, you engage with the public, you engage with kids outside playing. So many different things. It's fun. It's actually, it kind of makes a time go by during the lull of the day, just interacting with people. It's a social thing, and you get to learn so many different things that you don't get to do if you just individualize inside the car. You get to see nooks and crannies. You get to figure out who the players are. You get to figure out who the nice people are, per se, for lack of a better term. And it makes so many things a lot easier. I know I've had a couple people come up to me just walking about in different areas of the area here that I'm working for, and they just randomly come up to you and say, "Hey, are you aware of this incident that took place last week?" No, I'm not. But what you might want to look into this. You might want to go knock on that door, and I can go transfer that information to someone else who's actually following up on the case.
Yeah, there was a time from 2005 to 2011 where we literally had Skid Row as a relatively safe place to live. We did that. That was an impossible. That couldn't have happened without building those relationships. That couldn't have happened without me walking the beat. And instead of just going to arrest people looking for quantity as far as numbers, looking for quality, and actually sitting down and figuratively taking off your badge and gun and being human to people. Because deep down inside, what I've discovered is even the most loudmouth guy who's MFing you on the corner, deep down inside, he wants to be a friend. You know,
Yeah.
he does. He does. He's just been brainwashed. So a lot of people, unfortunately, the cops, we give up when things get bad, when things get hard, and we just say, you know what, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to sit in my car and I'm going to drive around, collect my paycheck, and leave. That's a real thing that happens. I'm not knocking them, and I understand it because it's so hostile today. I refuse to do that. And let me tell you what embracing the community did for me, and walking the beat and talking one-on-one with people and sitting in the park, sitting in the bad areas on purpose, and passing out hygiene kits and bottled water, and connecting and networking with drug programs and shelters and housing 150 people and getting people connected to services and programs. Let me tell you what that did for me. I was not doing it to juice people for information or get information on crime. I was not doing it for that reason. I did it because that's who I am. That's my DNA. That's what my parents would have did. The result of that was me being able to bar 75 known non-homeless gang members and drug dealers out of Skid Row for 3 years.
Okay.
And guess where that came from? The community. Because when you walk the beat, you're going to find that there is a silent majority in the community. They just can't voice it because they have a figurative, and sometimes literal gun to their head telling them don't smile at, don't look at. I had a woman get stabbed just for smiling at me.
Wow.
Now you would think, okay, I'm not going to go and be in the community. No, I'm not going to stop. I hated that happened to her. I went to see her at the hospital, but what she told me, I'll never forget, was, Joseph, I don't care what happens to me. You keep doing what you're doing. And because of what that woman said, I kept going. And over time, the community stopped that veil, that so-called thin blue line, started to become erased with me. I have a book called Stepping Across the Line, where that's exactly what I did. I stepped across that imaginary yellow line that kept police officers from their community. And I said, I'm going to make this community my family. And this is what I told myself. I said, I'm not only the senior lead officer in charge of the safety of service providers, drug counselors, pastors, and social workers. That's not just who I serve. I'm also the senior lead officer for gang members, for hustlers, for pimps, for drug addicts. And I know there's somebody watching this going, for pimps and drug addicts and gang members. Listen, okay, my job is to protect and serve, not protect and serve a select few. I hate what the criminal element does. If you've watched Enemy Speak, you know that I hate crime with a passion.
Right.
But I don't hate the person. So if a gang member, a drug addict, or anybody comes to me and they're sincere and they need my help, I'm going to step across that imaginary line, and I'm going to give them the same level of service that I would give somebody at the Palisades. I'll give you one story that should capsulize what I'm saying. I remember there was this female gang member who hated my guts. She hated me so bad. She was spreading horrible rumors about me in Skid Row. I was a dirty cop. Every time I came back from vacation, I noticed every time I come on vacation, there was a new rumor about why I was gone. Oh, I ran off with a homeless woman. I left my wife and kids. Oh, I got...
Uh-oh. Lost the sound here. And while he's getting his sound back up, there's a question on the floor from a Facebook user right here. There you go. Can hear you.
Okay.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, so there was a rumor that I was arrested by the Russian mafia, arrested by the police for being engaged with the Russian mafia, and all of a sudden I come back the next day after my vacation, and people would be like, "I thought you got arrested. Nope, I'm still here. I thought you got shot. Nope, still here." And it was all from this female gang member who was telling people about these horrible rumors. So she hated me that bad. One day, she was standing on 5th and San Julian, and a rival gang member pulled up, got out of his car, and beat her with a .45 caliber weapon. Severely, just completely messed up her face. And of course, she didn't know what to do. Even the gang members were going up to her and saying, you know what? The only one that's going to help you, which wasn't true, but it's true. The only one that's going to help you is Officer Joseph. She went to the station, and when they found me, I looked at her face and tears started to well up from my eyes. I don't care how you feel about me. I don't care what you're doing in these streets. You tell me where this man is, I'll have him in custody today. She told me. We went down there. I got some hard-boiled cops from Southern Division, and we went there, knocked on his door, and brought him in. We brought him in. And ever since that day, she felt like someone cared about them from a place that she was indoctrinated not to expect it. And I kept doing that for the people of Skid Row, because in some communities that are marginalized or poor or disenfranchised, they need you to prove it. If you don't prove it, they're not going to believe you. They're not going to believe you. Yeah,
it's a good story, and I want to jump into some more of the incidents of Skid Row and homelessness. We got a couple questions on the floor from Facebook user. One is growing up in New York City, used to play for PAL basketball. It was great. Why isn't that around anymore? I can speak from this area. PAL is still around. It's more focused on baseball. And not any other sports that I'm aware of. Anyone on here can correct me if I'm wrong. Deon, is PAL in your area?
It's on a smaller scale, and that's due to funding issues right now. But you don't have to have a PAL program. I didn't have a PAL program when I was in Skid Row. A lot of things I did off the cuff. There were several programs I created in Skid Row. The first was called the Just Like You Mentor Program. Okay. And I discovered that there were about 200 kids who were staying in the shelters of Skid Row. I discovered that, and they didn't have any mentors. I went to go talk to them, and I was, I did the old dog and pony thing that most people do, right? Hey, kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? Hey, kid. And one kid's like football player, basketball player. And then I saw this one kid, 12-year-old girl, looking out of the window while I was talking. I said, hey, girl, the party's over here. What do you want to be? And she looked at me and said, well, if you guys don't get me and my family out of here, I'm going to probably be like these two people having sex on the sidewalk out here. Wow. And that broke my spirit. So I went to the station and I let my partners handle it because I was too emotional to handle it. And I came out and said, what could I do? Or who can I put in front of these kids who are just like them? Ding, 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 ding. The Just Like You program was born. And I created a program where I poured into the kids and I showed love to them, but I also brought in people whose lives mirrored these kids who went on to become success stories. And that program was very successful. And it helped one group of kids get their grade level up 2 grade levels. It was a police officer who did that. And that wasn't an official program. It's just something I did, of course, with the blessing of a very forward-driven leadership I had at the time. Then I had a program called Ladies Night, right? Ladies Night, another off-the-cuff program, right? A program where I knew a lot of women were being sexually assaulted and raped in Skid Row. In fact, I know that for a fact because I was an undercover investigator for 2 years. And my job was to go out and arrest sex workers. And many of the sex workers I arrested or tried to arrest, they were raped right before they got to me, right? And they didn't want help. So when I became a senior lead officer, we still had women who were coming up and saying, Joseph, they're still touching us while we're asleep on the sidewalk. They're urinating on us. They're busting nuts on us while we're asleep. Excuse me for getting graphic, but this is Skid Row. And she said, what can we do? So I created a program called Ladies Night. And because of the relationships I established, they allowed me to use one of the big centers in Skid Row. And I put out 50 chairs expecting 15 women to show up. I had pizza, balloons, a DJ, music, everything. I rolled out the red carpet for them. I even brought a district attorney, a city attorney. 175 women from Skid Row came out to the first Ladies Night. And we taught them their rights. I don't care if you're a sex worker, on the pole, on the pipe, or on parole, or undocumented. If somebody violates you, whether it be domestic violence or a rape, you can come to us. And we even taught them self-defense with my twin brother, who is a 8th degree black belt and everything. So, so that was the second program. Once again, I call it grassroots policing. You don't need to go always through your department's programs, but whatever you do, always make sure you get the blessing of your commanding officer. And like I said, I had some incredible forward-thinking commanding officers at the time. The last program I created was the Old Blue substation, where I would take our big old mobile station that was used for tactical incidents, major incidents, and I hijacked it and I would park it in the most dangerous parts of Skid Row. And people thought that when I got out, I was going to have chains and handcuffs and everything else. But what I ended up coming out with was hygiene kits, bottled water, and program information on how to get hooked up on housing, transitional housing facilities away from Skid Row. And the people loved it. And what I loved about that was it would separate the wolves from the sheep. The drug dealers would leave, and who was left? The people who needed us. And they would come to us and be like, one lady was like, I don't know why you're doing this, but don't you ever leave, baby. Don't you ever leave. And they would give me information and cakes and cookies and all kind of crap. So these are things you can do without being prompted to or prodded by your agency to do it. And it's more genuine when it comes through that way. Right. Because it's not something that's just put together. Let's just do something for the community that looks good on paper. No, this is real and it has impact and it helps.
And it's highly needed. Absolutely. A question on the floor from a Facebook user. Do you think police departments have done away with community policing in today's society? We kind of touched on that already. Both of us, I think we can agree on that we have not done away with it. The game has changed, and you've basically explained that as well.
Well, actually, I will answer that. The truth, and you said it best, Clee, that no, we have not gotten rid of it. It's just the media and our detractors won't allow it to be talked about. Community policing is still ongoing. Let's talk about the pandemic and the horrible George Floyd tragedy, which we all agree was wrong. No one can dispute that. Community policing was very strong. It was working. And then, of course, the pandemic hits. And what happened during the pandemic? There was a lockdown. People had to be locked down in their silos. And I remember driving through my streets, and at 8 o'clock, all the people would hang out the window and clap for us, thanking us for what we were doing and being out there and putting our lives on the line in the midst of a pandemic. And then George Floyd was killed. And I I'll never forget, these people were locked in their silos, and it was 24/7 news coverage of the negative exception of law enforcement.
Yeah,
It was nonstop
Mhm.
indoctrination. So now the same people that were clapping were now giving you the finger. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. The same people that
Yeah.
were in our Citizens Academy class were now throwing rocks at us,
Yeah.
because they had a steady stream of only being focused on a negative exception. But if people really knew, if the media did their job and really talked about what police officers, I'm not talking about face painting with kids. I'm not talking
Mhm.
about that stuff. I'm talking about real grassroots, get in there, save lives, open your heart to the community stuff that is actually going on. I think it would give the general public a sense of balance. And so, no, it still exists. It's still happening. It's
Yeah.
just not being reported to you.
It's one-sided. Absolutely. You see a lot of things, like you said, from the media standpoint. Right now, we're going to pause for the cause. 1 second video with starting Be Safe, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about homelessness and prevention and recovery. All right, stand by.
I can't believe people leave their car doors unlocked. I found credit cards, debit cards, and social security cards. It's like stealing candy from a baby.
Aha! I caught you.
Party pooper, be safe. You can't stop me. I know my rights. I'm just walking around here.
Listen, ladies and gentlemen, the days of Mayberry are pretty much over. I'll take Rob You Blind to jail. However, he will be back. It's important to keep all your doors locked and your valuables secured, because Rob You Blind will take full advantage of crimes of opportunity. So remember to take the extra step and lock your stuff up. And that's your tip of the day from Sergeant Be Safe.
Subscribe now.
And there you go, Sergeant Be Safe. We got. Let me know, guys, who want voiceovers. We got more cartoons coming, but we're gonna jump right back into the interview. We got Deon Joseph here. He gave us a little background on how the lineage of how his family and him took hold of fighting homelessness in his area. What kind of things you said, talking about hygiene kits, but can you tell us about prevention or recovery from actually being in a homeless area? You're talking about Skid Row.
Well, right now, I feel like our system is not taking recovery seriously. You can't call a place that has 108 programs designed to help the homeless get on their feet. You can't realistically call it a recovery zone where you create hands-off policies that relates to crime, where you have drug dealers not only standing outside of their drug program, but allowing them inside as well, and slapping them on the wrist when they try to keep people on the endless spiral of addiction or kill your loved one with fentanyl. So
Exactly.
I tell people all the time, look, we know part of homelessness is high rent, poor economy, lack of jobs, sometimes a poor education. But where I work and in similar places like that, it's not those things. 2/3 of the individuals who I serve who are living on the streets, and have been doing so since Bill Clinton was in office. Okay. So this is nothing new. Okay.
Right.
They got used, because you got to remember, a human being can adapt to anything if you allow it. And that's the key, if you allow it. So a lot of these individuals are in the streets, 2/3 of them, due to addiction, and even worse, addiction and mental illness. And that's why it's so difficult to solve it, because our leaders, some of them, are dancing around that issue to try to solve it when that's the heart of the issue. So what they've done essentially is taken the teeth out of the laws and eradicated mandatory drug programs upon arrest. So now a drug addict is saying, or alcoholic is saying, look, I don't even have to go to a drug program. I don't have to go anymore. Oh, great. I'm going to choose this. So you can offer them housing all day. Let me give you an example. I told you from 2005 to 2011, I housed 150 people. Now that was out of 2,000 people who would be in the streets of Skid Row on average. How come in that little 6 years, 10-year span, or whatever span it was, only 150 people came to me? That was the 150 who were ready. Everybody knew if you needed a leg up, you can go to Officer Joseph and he'd hook you up, or get you hooked up some kind of way. But that was the 150 who were ready. And out of that 150 who I actually house in emergency, transitional, or even permanent housing, only half of them stayed in the program. You know why? Because they didn't like the rules. I can't bring my drugs in here. I can't bring my drug dealer or my loan shark in here. I can't do this, X, Y, Z. So therefore, I'm going to walk out. And so that's what people need to understand. The driving force with homelessness and even mental illness today across this country, most of it is due to addiction. And if we don't face that reality and put some teeth back in the law, not to criminalize somebody and put them away for life for being in possession of a controlled substance, that's stupid. And I know there's a lot of people who like sound bites and they take what I say and they run with it. No, I don't want that at all. But you got to arrest them to get them in the system for at least for a little while to dry them out. They got to dry out first before you can even reach them. And then when they're out, of course, I'm 100% for mandatory drug programs that they have to go to. And if they don't go to, we can arrest them, bring them back. And I saw that work. And it was a program called Prop 36. I saw that work better than its hands-off approach. You want to see what the hands-off approach looks like? Look at San Francisco right now. Look at Austin, Texas right now. Look at Skid Row and other places like that. With Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where there's a street you can drive down there and it just looks like, and I'm not demonizing people, it's just what it looks like, a thriller video. You know, it's sad, it's tragic. And that comes from no mandatory drug programs and a hands-off approach. People can't get better on their own. Now, I'm not saying that is the panacea. I'm not saying it's 100% proof, but I saw more people being helped and getting housed and getting helped when you did have the justice system getting involved in that respect. Yes. Exactly. So, yeah.
Got a comment on
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just addressing a comment on the floor from Clarence Stokes talking about how the homelessness has skyrocketed since the government stopped investing in mental illness.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on that. The other issue is mental illness. Mental illness. America's solution to mental illness back in the 70s was to shut down the asylums, right? Kick people out in the streets, sprinkle some pills on them in the name of civil liberties and say, yay, you're free. Okay, go enjoy your civil liberties, right? And I don't care who you blame because it's both the left and the right who are equally responsible for that. So I don't want to hear any of this partisan nonsense. Oh, it was Reagan. Oh, it was Kennedy. Stop. It was all of them, okay? It was all of them. Believe me, I'm touching the issue, folks. I know who it was. So so the American solution was to sprinkle pills on them and kick them out in the street in the name of civil liberties, right? But here's what happened. Some of them fell into the arms of family members who tried their best to help them. But many ended up being kicked out, forced out, or shoved into places like Skid Row, because Skid Row back then was LA's dirty little secret, right? It was like a concentration camp without walls. We didn't want to see them. We don't want to deal with them, so send them in there, right? So what would happen to these people, and this is real, folks, is they would come to Skid Row with their prescribed medication, but their prescribed medication made them feel down and lethargic. And this was happening for years and decades and decades. So they would sell, throw away, or get rid of their prescribed medication and then start self-medicating on the hard stuff like crack cocaine, methamphetamines, now spice, heroin, and yes, I'm sorry, marijuana. Marijuana may not affect you or I, okay? Of course, I don't smoke marijuana, but if you're a regular person or you're healthy, but if you're dealing with mental illness, depending on what degree, it can have disastrous consequences. And being mentally ill is not a crime. I'm telling you this as a police officer. This is a police officer telling you that being mentally ill is not a crime, okay? It's not a crime to be paranoid schizophrenic. It's not a crime to be bipolar. Matter of fact, when it's just that, that's easy. I remember there was a guy named John, when he's off his meds, but he's not on drugs, he would climb up on top of a roof, 2-story building, butt naked, and wag his tail in front of everybody. And I'd say, hey, John, it's Officer Joseph. I need you to come down. He said, Joseph, is that you? Okay, for you, I'll come down. He climbed down. John on meth, he's not coming down. He's going to do a triple backflip and land on his head on the concrete and kill himself, because now there's a chemical buffer between them and the crisis. And it's hard even for the most well-trained mental health clinician they won't even approach them when they're in such a high level of an agitated state of delirium. So all this stuff you're hearing on the news about, why don't they have mental health people, mental health clinicians? We've tried that. That was one of my ideas in 2014. We had a program called Operation Healthy Streets, where it was us working alongside with mental health clinicians, and I got them out of their cubicles to walk the streets. Of course, they're able to handle somebody who's docile. We all can do that. But when somebody's doing backflips with a sword in their hand, they're not going to approach them. And who are they going to call? The
Calling
police.
us. Yeah.
They're going to call us, and we got to go in there. We got to detain them first. And sometimes that's not always so pretty when you're dealing with that chemical buffer that's making them go from 0 to 100, and they can't hear you. No amount of verbal judo is going to fix it. You sometimes have to go hands-on, and rarely do we ever have to get into uses of force or serious uses of force. It's rare that we even shoot them, but oftentimes it's not pretty when we have to get them detained. And once we get them detained, here's the failure. Here's the systemic failure I keep telling you guys about. We put them on a 72-hour hold. That's not even 72 hours anymore, folks. Do you guys know that?
Mm-hmm.
We take them to the hospital, a contract hospital. They're there for 6 hours because they're full. Of
Yep.
course, they do what's called they clean themselves up because they want to go use drugs again. So the doctor say, "Here's your pills. You feeling better?" And they go, "Yeah, I feel great. I'm not going to kill myself." And then they go right back out. And guess what? They turn themselves to a pizza with another MTA bus. Right? This is where the systemic fails. We didn't fail them. We're responding to the systemic failure. And if a cop is telling you this, these politicians, these legislators, they need to stop and listen. It should never be 72 hours. For someone who's been severely mentally ill and dual diagnosed on drugs, it should be 6 weeks. And here's why. In 6 weeks, it takes about 6 weeks for them to benefit from the therapeutic attributes of their medication.
Mm-hmm.
Just to stabilize them, it takes 6 weeks. Okay? You wouldn't let a heart patient off the operating table after a triple bypass the next day, would you? No. But they do that to mental health patients, right? So the other thing is this. In that 6 weeks, you got to dry them out. They have to be clean so they can hear you. They got to get sober.
Yes.
So when they're sober, they can hear you. Now that they can hear you, the professionals who were great, God bless all our mental health professionals, develop a rapport and find out who their family members are, contact them, and work towards streamlining the process of conservatorships so these families can get together and help get some loving level of care and control over their loved one when they're spiraling like that. So we have to streamline the process. That can be done in 6 weeks. And even if that fails and they can't connect them to a loved one, if they've been on their medication for a steady time and they're used to taking it, then if they get released again to the streets, at least they'll survive a little longer before they end up running into Officer Joseph again, wearing one sock, butt naked, carrying a baseball bat in the middle of the street. Okay, exactly. So that's what I want the general public to understand. That we are not the failures, and I'm not saying that there aren't cops who have failed. That's true. There are cops who have failed. There's a video right now floating on the internet right now where I'm seeing a failure of law enforcement. There are cops who fail us, but we're as a whole, we're not the systemic failure. We're responding to the failure of the system for not fixing it and doing the right things to make it easier for us to help people without it going there.
Good explanation. Thank you. I know. I remember when the state hospital around here shut down, and everyone's like, "What are we going to do now?" Because the treatments, the counselors were there. They'd be there for undisclosed amount of time, working on whatever issues or just drying out, like you said. So now, instead of that being everyone's running the streets, and family members put them out, then we get that call that we have to deal with them, and we have to deal with them when they're on level 10. And we don't know what's in their system. They've already we may know them. We may know a little bit about what's going on. But again, you can't communicate with someone who has that buffer and they're on level 10 and they're only seeing red. So finally, if we get them detained, we take them down to the hospital. We go for our 302 or the crisis. We have a co-responder. We go for the 302 or the 201 as well. Once they get evaluated by the doctors and they get medically cleared, normally they're coming down off of whatever's in their system and they can speak and think a little bit more thoroughly, and they can talk to the doctors and basically finesse the doctor saying, "Yeah, I'm feeling fine. I'm sorry I had this," and they can sign themselves out. And within a matter of 6 to 12 hours, instead of a 72-hour hold, which is our maximum, unfortunately, like you said, they're back out in 6 to 12 hours. And again, we're getting that same call because now that they use whatever they used before and it's having a double dose effect.
Yeah, and this is the thing that the general public needs to know, and that's one of the biggest shames, because when they release these individuals, when they clean up, as you described, that's called the cleanup, when they clean themselves up so they can be released. The doctors know that these are repeat customers. They've been through this 6, 7, 8, 9 times. So there comes a point where you got to say, you know what, enough's enough. But once again, that comes to our legislators and our civil liberty. We need our civil liberties groups, legislators, cops, firefighters, and mental health experts, everybody to stop finger pointing and put their partisan nonsense down. Come to the table with intentionality on trying to solve this problem, and let's change this. It should be 6 weeks. I'm not for bringing back the asylums. I understand how inhumane they are, and I don't want to violate someone's constitutional rights or freedom. But we should base that on the effectiveness of the medication they're taking before we release them into the streets. And if we do release them, we got to make sure we have more support, or we're just going to continue down this road. We're going to be talking about this issue 20 years from now if we don't do exactly as I say. And I'm a cop. I don't claim to know all the answers,
Right.
but I work in what's called the mental health capital of the world. I've seen every form of mental illness. I know every medication. I know the effects of all of it. And I'm telling you from what I've touched, okay, not from what I read about from my college professor or from a skewed news report, trying to convince you that there's nothing wrong with these people. I'm touching it. I'm seeing the tragedy. I got stories that'll make you cry as it relates to mental illness. And I know we don't have time to go through it all, but it would break your heart. It would break your heart, the things that I've seen.
I believe it. Yeah. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to pause for the calls one more time, and we're coming right back.
Oh, come on. I got a ticket. I was only there for a minute.
I'm sorry, sir. The sign clearly says no parking, and we get a lot of complaints about people parking there.
Look, I'm in a hurry. Can I resolve it here?
I'm sorry, you cannot. Your best option would be to take a hearing in front of the judge. Believe it or not, most situations can be resolved later by not getting upset and trying to resolve the issue on the spot. You could take a hearing in front of the judge, and sometimes things could work themselves out.
That sounds good to me. Not guilty.
Sorry for my attitude. Thank you, Sergeant B. Be safe.
It's best if you don't get mad and try and fix things in a moment. That could sometimes make things worse. And that's your tip of the day to get you on your way.
All right, and we are back. I wanted to go ahead and we had to take that pause for the calls. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to be a respecter of your time. I know you said, I had something to do, so I don't want to monopolize your time. I appreciate you coming on here. In the course of the conversation, we talked about a lot of different things. Is there anything that I may have forgotten to ask you, or is there anything that may have jogged your memory that you would like to share with us? Right now, the floor is yours.
Well, I just want to talk to law enforcement personnel about crisis. And right now, it seems like every day there's a crisis, and how we respond to the crisis is so important. The goal, whenever something happens across this country, is try to prevent the Ferguson effect. And the Ferguson effect, I don't care what anybody says, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And let me explain the Ferguson effect. A tragedy happened, whether you are on one side or the other, I don't care. Okay, a young man was killed by a police officer, and based on my training experience, it was a justified shooting based on the totality of the circumstances, have nothing to do with race. But what happened with that is when the media and when our detractors and when advocates get in there and stir the pot, instead of going forward, a lot of the officers backed out of the area. When you backed out of the area, there's one voice that the people hear. And of course, that's our detractor who's filling detractors who are filling people with propaganda and nonsense and lies. Half the stuff we were told about what happened that day was completely false. And of course, people are emotional at that time. And when people get emotional, their rational side starts to dissipate. And because people are addicted to emotions, that's just the way people are wired. Right? Being emotional is delicious. Rationality is not. It's like dry bread. Go put a piece of white dry bread in your mouth. You're not going to really enjoy it. You need mayo, you need ranch dressing, you need poppy seed sauce, you need all that good stuff. That's delicious now. It's not even bread anymore once you put all that stuff on it.
No, it's not.
So when I worked, I remember 2015-16, there was an incident in my community where I served, where a homeless man was shot by one of our officers, and it was a justified shooting. I mean, I would have probably ended up doing the same thing if I was there. I saw the video, and I remember when it happened, I got a phone call from one of the shelters who I networked with, and they said, "Oh my God, Joseph, it's going to be a riot out here. The activists are out here saying that you shot somebody." I wasn't even there. I'm sitting at home in my underwear, wearing my Superman drawers, drinking a strawberry smoothie, right? On my day off, right? And here I have one of my friends from the mission saying that I shot somebody when I'm at home. I said, what? So tell me what happened. Well, they're saying you guys assassinated a homeless man. Of course, the activists are out there spreading their propaganda. Well, of course, they had some additional footage that showed the truth, that this individual grabbed the officer's gun. And if it hadn't been for the officer shooting, somebody would have been dead that day. Other than it could have been a cop, it could have been a civilian from the hands of the individual that was shot. So I put my clothes on. I said, I'm coming in first thing in the morning. I went there. And with the blessing of my commanding officer, I said, I'm going to walk the streets of Skid Row. And he was like, I don't know. It might be crazy out there, Joseph. I said, hey, this is my streets. This is my family out here. I know these people. So I went with a fellow officer. We walked the beat. And instead of backing out, we went in and we engaged the community. And the community came to me. And I discovered this. 75% of the community supported what the officers did. One guy said, Joseph, if you guys wouldn't have shot that guy, we would have shot him. That's literally what he said. I'll never forget. And then for the 25% that didn't, who still bought into what the activists were trying to sell and push, I was able to have real dialogue. Though I wasn't allowed to speak directly to the incident, I was able to get them to understand policy, human nature, reaction, and all these things. And I'll never forget, there was this guy I'll call Knockout. I have his greatest hits sitting at my desk because he's a boxer, former boxer. And he comes up to me and said, Joseph, you guys are a bunch of cowards. Why did it take 5 officers to take down one homeless man? They always key on these words to pull up homeless, black, poor, and all these things that in the heat of the moment, none of these things matter when the officer's going through it, trying to stop a situation. So he kept going on and on and on. I said, look, dude, I know you're good with your hands. And me, I'm strong as an ox and I could twist you up like a pretzel. If you and this is around about 100 people who surrounded me, right? Yelling and screaming, right? I didn't run. I said, if you and I got into a fight right now, I guarantee you that you or me is going to end up going to a hospital right now because of just how big and strong our capabilities, right? Yeah. I said, but that's not the goal. I'm a professional. My job is not to cause a loss of life. My job is to try to minimize as much injury and respond with reasonable force. So instead of me twisting you up like a pretzel and having you scream brutality all day, here's what we'll do. I'll call my fellow officers. One guy will grab an arm, somebody will grab a leg, and somebody will grab both your legs. We'll use our body weight to hold you down. We'll handcuff you. You may have some scratches. I may have some scratches. But guess what? 99.9% of the time, we're both going to go home. You a little later than me because you got to get booked. But we're using these tactics not because we're cowards, because half the cops out there, they are MMA fighters. Then you got some who can't fight their way out of a piece of tissue. It just is what it is. It's just a fact. But I'm from Long Beach. I know how to fight. Look at these knuckles, man. I know how to squat. And I'm no coward. But I'm a professional. And the goal is to get that person as safely. And it's not always going to be pretty. Look, I work in Skid Row. Do you think I want to be wrestling around on a urine-soaked sidewalk? Has anybody listening to this podcast ever been in a fight with somebody in the streets of Skid Row and you stood up and you had 2 hypodermic needles hanging from your vest? Anybody ever had that happen to you? Nobody. I don't want that. I want to end everything as peaceful as I possibly can. And when I explained it to the public like that, all of a sudden I'm like, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I probably would have done the same thing. So for that some 25%, it's hands down. And 2 days later, I showed up at a memorial service for the person who was shot. Not because I thought he was a great guy, but I knew my community was being brainwashed. And I did not want the activists to get a hold of them and make them think that we were the enemy. I was there as a voice for mental illness. I was there to support the community in all of our collective belief that the system has to change. And I went to that memorial, and it was a lot of cops were mad at me for doing that, and I don't even care. My reasoning was not because of him. It was for my community. And from doing that, we prevented the Ferguson effect. And I'm still able to walk safely in my community. So I'll end that conversation with this. My dad said this to me once when I was involved in another controversy. He says, from controversy comes focus, and from focus comes your truth. Don't be afraid of controversy, because they're focused on you. And now it's your time to explain. Now it's your time to talk about. Now, when that light shines on you, tell the public the truth. And that's what I did. And we prevented the Ferguson effect. And I'm still able to walk the streets of Skid Row alone because of that.
Man, great live, great story, great information. That's a beautiful quote. I appreciate everything that you shared with us. I appreciate you making yourself available. I've learned a lot myself. I know throughout the interaction, we had some wonderful questions on here. If you have any other questions, please feel free to bring them through. We'll answer them as best as we can electronically. But Deon Joseph, thank you for making yourself available. I appreciate it. I appreciate all you do. Thank you for your service, and continue to be a positive force here in our nation, driving the blue line forward.
Roger that. God bless you, sir. You take care.
Absolutely. Thank you. You too. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you tag, like, share, subscribe. We will be continuing on weekly with our interviews, and have a wonderful night. It's Coach Clee coming at you. Have a good night. Peace.